starting with 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. 5 laps to go. It doesn't look like there's any wheels.
Hey, what's going on, everyone, and welcome back to Rail to Gutter. So I am presenting you guys the last race of pretty much the CBR series finale, which is 6 to 6. Really quick shout out to this guy right here, Efrain Tash. We actually raced in the last CBR race, the 5th of the 6th, which is a couple weeks back, and that's how he ended up actually spotting me. It took me a second to actually recognize him, and I apologize for that. Also, the Chamois brothers are out here. They also commented on the video, and they put in work, man, seriously. And actually another shout out to pretty much all the racers, but especially this guy right here that raised his arm on the top left hand side. He came out here in just regular shorts, regular t-shirt, some regular flat shoes, man, and he put in work, dude. Like, for someone, you could tell, like, it might have been his first race. I hope he continues to come out more and, you know, develops a love for racing and just cycling in general, because cycling is, like, definitely one of those sports that you can either do, you know, without racing or, you know, with racing. It's really up to you. You know, it also keeps you mentally, like, happy for the most part, I would say, at least in my opinion. So yeah, but we're pretty much off. So we're off to the race. Just some general information. I honestly did not sleep very much for this race. I think I probably slept no more than like 45 minutes, probably. But you know, it wasn't too bad. I woke up at like 3:30 in the morning, and we showed up to the CBR race with the girlfriend around probably 5 in the morning, I want to say. I was the second car. I was the second car in the parking lot. It was, oh man, it was so early, but I was like fully awake, I had already had a cup of coffee, so, you know, we were good to go. Just some quick information on the course. A bunch of 4 left-handers. This is the fastest descent section of the entire course. Nothing too technical, just straightforward, you know, 4-corner crit. And this little section is kind of like a false flat, sort of a slightly punchy uphill little rolling hill. You can go up it pretty quickly after you descend, you know, and if you have enough momentum, you probably only have to pedal half of it. So yeah, again, for the most part, it's a couple of like false flats. Like this section is kind of like a false flat. It looks like it's flat, but it really isn't. And then it flattens out for a second, and then it's like another false flat. It's crazy because this course usually is done in a clockwise for right-handers, but this time it was done in 4 left-handers, and I actually thought it was the other way around before I showed up. Another thing, I get squeezed here for a second. I got squeezed. I'm like, oh man, that was actually probably like one of the most nervous moments I had in the entire race. But hey, I learned something. You know, I can hold my own for the most part. And for the other thing is that, you know, I didn't freak out. I was like, don't get nervous. Like, if he gets close, just, you know, just hold your front wheel away from his, and, you know, we'll all stay upright so no one crashes into anybody and everybody's good to go. So yeah. The other thing was that besides waking up early, you know, and having my caffeine, getting a croissant in my system, getting something in my system, I guess. I don't really like eating in the morning. It's just not, I don't know, I don't like it. The other thing, this was a bit of a factor, was weather. So right now that California is kind of going through, you know, fall, and we're going into winter, I'm still getting acclimated to early morning, like that early morning chilly weather, and it was a bit of a problem. I did a warm-up before I even jumped into this, but like in the warm-up I was wearing my loose pullover sweater that I have brought with me. I was on the other side of the street actually just doing a warm-up, and I realized that, you know what, like, oh crap, like the air's kind of cold, and I had my neck gaiter, but I had taken it off because I was like, you know, I'm probably not gonna need it. I got my hoodie on, or maybe I'll put it on later. So my girlfriend was holding on to it for me, but I was like, you know what, I'll be fine. I don't think I need it. But then I realized, like, oh man, like I kind of regret it. I kind of regret not putting it on, because the cold air was actually beginning to affect my breathing and my recovery, which was a huge problem in this race. It has happened to me before in the other side of CBR. So on the other side there is another course that usually gets used for other races. Usually like the season opener, the other CBR course is opened up, and that's the one that you start off with. Well, in one of those races, I remember I didn't get a warm-up, one, and two, it was really cold. It was actually even colder than this day. This day was like 54, 55. The day that I didn't get a warm-up and I did that was, I think, last year in January, and I think it was like 30 degrees outside, something like that. It was cold, man. And breathing in the cold air on this day slowly but surely started to affect my breathing, recovery, overall just how I felt. I was just doing my best to not let it mentally mess me up, but you know, physically I just wasn't all there after about like the 5th, 6th lap. I was trying to fight it off, you know, and just try and recover in the back of the group. That's another thing that I did. Once I realized, like, you know what, this is probably not going to work out how I mentally had it in my head. I had a mental plan. I'm like, oh, you know what, I'm going to hold on to the back of the group, and whenever like I see a position open up, I'm just going to slide up in there, you know, and take that spot and just move up slowly but surely and just try to stay in the front somewhere. I don't have to sprint for anything, no preems, nothing, just stay in the front with the group and take efficient lines and save your energy for the end, right? So that was the whole point. That's what I had mentally had in my head. But I always have a tendency of starting off in the back because I like keeping my eye on the group in front of me. I want to see what the dynamic is of the group at that moment. So overall, this group on this day, this race was actually a lot more mellow than any other CBR race I've ever done. Like, not even the Laverne Majestic Crit race was this mellow at all whatsoever, and that's a slightly more technical course, but it wasn't this mellow. I mean, dude, I think the slowest point we hit was like 20 miles an hour, and that's like zone 2, zone 3 for me, you know, barely. I don't have a power meter, so, you know, I when I say zones, for me, I mean like heart rate, you know, next to speed. So yeah, it was pretty chill. Only problem is that here, this corner here was still a bit of a problem for me, because every time that I would hit that turn, we would slow down, I would get caught up behind someone, or I would just you know, get gapped off a little bit, and I would have to slowly but surely shut that down. The only thing that actually I think kept me attached to the group was the fact that every time we would pass that turn up, I would actually continue to keep my cadence up so I can just pedal through the turn, and as soon as the group is beginning to pick speed back up, I was already connected, so actually my momentum would let me connect back to the group. So the other thing was that as air was we're back to climate again, as the cold air was beginning to affect me more and more, you'll probably see that I'm taking more and more sips of water as the race progresses. And actually my bottle only had like half the amount that it normally would, because I was like, you know what, for 25 minutes I highly doubt I'm gonna need a whole bottle. So, well, another thing, this guy on the right hand side with the trek bike, he screams out, he's all like, stage 2, stage 2, pick it up, something like that. And I'm like, oh my god, mentally I'm like, dude, if they start picking it up, I don't know how I'm gonna survive this. Like, it's cold, it's gonna get really hard in a bit, and it's just like, I'm gonna flop. I'm gonna eat it right here. So in the end, I actually ended up following his wheel, because I was like, you know what, I need to take an outside line, since I don't have a rear view camera, but you can't really see anything in the back, because there's actually no one really behind me, other than lap riders, but you know, they're farther back. I decided to take a far right side wheel, and then as we come into this section, I actually shoot for the inside apex, because I wanted to keep it as fast and as tight as I possibly could to avoid losing too much momentum, because every single time, and I was already noticing every single time we would pass that section, the group would speed up, and then we would have to like surge just to catch back up. So to kind of counteract that, I was already speeding up. As soon as we exited the turn, I was already speeding up, and then up into the small little hill, and then just keep that momentum going into this section. So I feel like that's the only thing that kind of kept me with the pact. At this point, I had already mentally made the decision, like, okay, this is not going to work. Like, I'm just going to have to do my best to hold on to the back and then just try and recover and stay with the group. Like, there's going to be no trying to shoot up for the front, nothing like that. Like, my recovery from my inability to breathe properly with this cold air is preventing me from really doing more than I can do right this moment. So I just kind of had to accept that fact. And once I accepted it, I actually had more fun, because I was like, you know what? I'm just going to try and just hang out in the back and treat it like a super hard race. That's kind of mellow in a way, but, you know, just treat it like a hard race, but just hang out in the back as best you can, really. That's all I got. That was my whole train of thought at this moment, you know. Don't crash. Treat it like a semi-hard race, and, you know, hold wheels, try to be efficient as possible, and just hang out in the back till the finish, and don't get dropped, you know, because that was one thing that I really did not want to do, was just don't get dropped. So here we go again. We're going really fast. I'm still pedaling, and on the inside there was a lapped rider that actually caused us to slow down. So because of that, like, everyone, you know, on the inside just couldn't take the inside line fast enough. Otherwise we would have been probably over this little rolling hill. So that is one drawback. I think sometimes with being a lapped rider, and mind you, I've been there. Like, I feel like a lot of cyclists have been there. You know, most of us have been there, especially in the lower categories. Like, at some point, you know, let's say it's your first race. You've never done it before. You never actually, like, done a really fast race. You get dropped. You get lapped. As a lapped rider, it's not a good idea to take an inside line if the group is literally right behind you. Like, do not take an inside line. You should always go to the far right hand side or the far left hand side if you are a lapped rider. I mean, you're already behind, you know, and you don't want to get hit. Seriously, like, you do not want to get hit, especially from the back, dude. Like, everyone's gonna just literally roll all over you, and yeah, no one wants to go home with missing skin, right? So yeah, I've been there. I know exactly how missing skin feels like, and I can tell you it burns, it hurts, and it takes forever to heal. So yeah, especially in your hands. Yeah, if you haven't seen my crash video, yeah, you can go see my crash video. I'll make sure to link that as well. But yeah, here my heart rate jacked up to I think the new highest point that I had it ever, which was 206. And yeah, I felt like I was dying slowly but surely. Luckily, I kept it together. Again, I had to take more sips of water because my throat was beginning to actually tighten up a little bit. My breathing was really hard, and I struggled for sure. I have to definitely get acclimated to colder weather, so I'm really thinking about, instead of doing like indoor training, you know, just on the trainer, most likely I will because of the rain, you know, on those days, because, you know, in California we don't do that. I feel like maybe in California we don't do that as much. Maybe in other regions of the country, you know, other people definitely ride out in the rain, but I just don't. Yeah, I got a job, I got bills to pay, and I can't exactly be out hurt if I slide and fall all over the place, which I can say I have. I actually fell on the LA River. There was like a bunch of water that was there, and there was like you know, sort of like that algae that forms. Well, my tires, obviously your tires have zero grip in that sort of environment, so yeah, I kind of slipped and ate it. Luckily with water, you kind of just slip and slide all over the place. You end up with some bruises, very minor scratches, and you're okay, but even then you don't want to do that, you know. But yeah, I just have to get acclimated to breathing in cold air, and I gotta make sure I don't forget a neck gaiter for the next time for sure. Hopefully CBR comes back early in the year and we can get back to racing again in a couple of weeks for sure. I say a couple of weeks because I think the season starts back up sometime usually around mid-January usually, but you know, with the way things are still sort of going, you know, who's to say for sure that it'll come back in January, but hopefully. So again, at this point, the speed is still relatively the same. I think the average speed for the race was about like 24, 25-ish. So, you know, it was pretty high. at least for category 5. And here I think yeah, I have picked it up almost to like 30 miles an hour and take an inside line just to avoid taking an outside line so I can hold my momentum. And another problem I had was that I was getting caught up a lot of the time in the wind, and I didn't want to. And it was also because I didn't have a wheel to grab at that moment when I would take those turns. So I just had to use my momentum to catch back up, but in doing so, like, yeah, I was expelling a lot more energy than I really wanted to. So yeah, I didn't realize, like, you know, how much energy you really have to expel when you have to really shut down gaps that are in front of you, and it hurts a lot more than you really think. So that's another thing I have to remember to really train and work on. I don't really know what my top end looks like. You know, I've done 20-minute power tests, and overall they came out pretty good, but it's been a while, so I got to do that again. Training in surging, so a bunch of like intervals, I got to do that. More high intensity stuff. That was a problem, because when I looked at the overall, when I looked at my fit file for this race, when I was putting the overlays, I was in zone 5, like, I want to say like 23 minutes, and the race itself is 25 minutes long. I think overall in the end it was about 24 and 24 minutes and 30 seconds, something like that. And out of that time, I ended up actually being in zone 5 like 23 minutes. I gotta bring that down. I mean, if you're in zone 5 that whole time, yeah, you're pretty much in the hurt locker, like almost immediately, like right from the rip. So yeah, and that's why I have to take these crazy like little inside lines, you know, make sure my cadence stays high. And then as you can see, like, the surging happens again, the group is taking off, and then I have to do my best to hold on to the wheels. That's the problem with being in the back. I've said it before, it's like when you do take those inside lines and you're in the back, you're hoping that the back of the group stays together, but because it's basically like a big accordion, you know, it's always surging back and forth. The front is moving fast, and then in the middle it's like semi-slower, and then the back it slows down, then it picks back up, and it kind of rips apart. So yeah, that's the only real drawback of that, besides like not being able to see attacks. And the last thing actually also was that this group was a lot smaller than most mass start races that, you know, we've done before. I was a bit more used to being around like a higher amount of racers, and this one actually only had about 37, 38 riders in it. I think a couple of people didn't actually show up, but yeah, this was definitely a smaller group, but still, you know, still equally as hard. I don't know if everyone was affected by the cold air this morning. If you were, and you were in this race and you spot yourself, like, please let me know, you know, if this race felt like chill for you, you know, if it was a smooth, like, you know, race. Were you affected by the weather? Because, you know, it's very interesting to find out how others felt in the same race, because like I said, I felt like crap towards like the end. I mean, when I ended up stopping, I felt horrible. Like, I couldn't really breathe right. My back was hurting from not being able to breathe right. Again, my legs felt just fine. It's just that my breathing, my whole chest was on fire. So yeah, like, slowly but surely, I think it's this one. Yeah, we get gapped again, and I'm like, oh man, like, we're gonna have to close it down. And I can't mentally. I was telling myself, like, don't wait for others to shut it down at this point, because they might not be able to. But I did see this gent right here on the left hand side with the really high gear, which is crazy. I give him props, man. The guy with the red shoes, he had his gearing in like a 5211, while like pretty much the majority of the time, or 5212, I want to say, maybe. And dude, he was cranking that like the whole time. I think I can hear his front derailleur like grinding away. I was like, oh man, like, I hope that front derailleur does not break off for you, dude. But I give him props. He was seriously holding a really high gear, like, up for a long period of time. And yeah, he hung in there. So shout outs to that guy. And he was actually a pretty good wheel to follow for the most part. Like, he was actually pretty smooth in his pedaling, so that was pretty good. I felt fairly comfortable for the most part with the people that were back here in this section. But I was just dying in the back. So at this point it's all like just, you know, fight for survival. Fight for survival in a category 5 in the back, you know. But the other thing is that I was trying to avoid not pedaling through the turns. I was trying to always and continuously pedal through all the turns as much as I possibly could, so that way I do not have to re-accelerate and not be able to stay with the group. So here I actually let a gap open up because I wanted to take outside, inside, outside and continuously pedal. So here I continue to pedal, the group is speeding up again, and I'm still pedaling. Like I don't have a huge gap in front of me, just a little gap. But again, I still have to shut that down. I still have to get up, back up there, and yeah. So you can see some lap riders on the right-hand side. I believe this the FLX rider was actually out in the front for a while, dude. And he slowly but surely started falling off to the back. And yeah, you can tell like it although it was mellow at the beginning, it slowly but surely kind of picked up a little bit. Not a ridiculous amount, but a little bit in certain sections, more and more as the race progressed. And that's what made the race overall just a little difficult to deal with towards the end. At this point, actually, I remember at this point, I was just like, dude, like I'm beginning to kind of fall off the back a little more than I would like. And that's because my breathing was affected for so long and my recovery was so bad at this point that like I just could not hold it anymore. Like I remember looking over towards my girlfriend. She was sitting down right there to the right with the dog, and I remember that she like screamed out, you know, she's like, "You can do it." I'm like, "Oh my god, like dude, I'm dying back here." I'm dying back here. I'm like, "Oh dude, I don't know what to do." Like I cannot stop. Like I have to make it. So I did reconnect temporarily, but it was sort of pointless because in the end, you know, spoiler alert, you know, I ended up just kind of like letting the group go because like physically I just couldn't do it anymore. Like again, my chest was hurting so much from like, you know, my inability to like really take a really deep breath and like effectively like recover, that I just couldn't do it anymore. I think this was one of the last times that I did that turn, and then in the end I was just like, yeah, I think this is it. Like I'm gonna end up slowing it down, and I think I do. Like I looked behind me, I wanted to see if there was anyone there, and yeah, I'm like, you know what, I think this is gonna be it. So once I passed this lap to rider, I remember I just like I sort of clicked over to see if maybe I could just hold a slightly higher cadence than I normally would be, and I think I was at like 98 or 100 in cadence, and I still just could not close things down. I just couldn't do it anymore. I was like, dude, I'm getting so gassed. I'm at that point where I'm like, yeah, I'm gonna pop. And I tried my absolute best to just hold the wheel, just to draft up, but again, my heart rate was like at like 195 for so long, 194, 195 for so long that I just couldn't do it anymore. I was like, yeah, I think I'm done. Like I think this is it. And it kind of was. At this point, I remember I just let the group go. I was like, yeah, I'm not going to be able to do it. Even with a descent here, I was like, I could have given it a little more, but because of that continuous surge in the back of like having to close things down, being stuck out in the wind, I was just so tired. So yeah, I guess in a way I kind of got dropped, but I got dropped towards the end, like literally at the bitter end. And overall, I can't be mad at myself. It sucks because again, I wish I would have ended it better than that, at least with the group, you know, but I can't be too mad at myself over it. I did a lot better than I have in other races, and that in itself is like crazy. Like 2 years ago, I couldn't even do a lap with anybody, like with any group, period. My highest speed was like 17 miles an hour, and then, you know, some training, riding constantly, doing some mini intervals here and there, you know, doing sprints here and there, like kind of making mental notes of like, you know, kilometers, like, okay, from here to here, I'm going to try and do this much, you know, speed. Hopefully I can keep my heart rate down and etc. Like, it's difficult without a power meter, but, you know, I use speed and my heart rate to kind of tell me like, okay, this is how much you can do with your heart rate being, this number, and assuming that, I rested properly. So yeah, as you can tell, the group is pretty much like getting towards that turn already. I'm gassed. I'm tired. I'm beat. There was actually a spectator here who was like clapping. So shout outs to that guy. He was like, basically cheering us on. So thank you to that person. Definitely helped. I mean, honestly, I wanted to quit at this point. I was just so tired. I was done. I was like, yeah, I'm beat. Breathing was a huge problem at this point. My girlfriend, I think at this point, she's like, keep going, keep doing it. And I'm like, I'm nodding my head. I'm like, And then there's some riders that like kind of block me off for a second. I'm like, dude, come on. So yeah, at this point, I'm like, you know what? If I don't gas it, I'm gonna really be left behind. So I think at this point you can kind of slightly ignore the overlays. I was at 10 miles, but yeah, there was an issue. I had to edit that out because there was nothing in front of me. So here I didn't know that there was a crash, and then this guy comes out and he's like waving his hands, and I was like, I thought he was telling me that was it, like that my race is over, like get out of the way because the group's here. But he was doing that because there's a crash here, and I didn't know that, so I slowed down too much. And yeah, I was like, oh man, okay. So then I'm gonna do a little quick jump edit here, and I'm like, okay, like keep going, like you literally just have one lap to go, that's it. And then from a slight distance, like when I turn around, I'm like, okay, the group's not here yet. I'm like, I can probably do this, one lap, just one lap. And then I see the race director flagging me down. I'm like, oh my god, man, I had one lap to go, that was it, I would have made it. But that's pretty much it. I hope you guys enjoyed the commentary. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. Make sure you guys subscribe, comment down below, and I'll catch you guys at the next one. Thanks, you guys.